On the Essex-Suffolk border is a village with a small population but a larger reputation for being one of the most haunted locations in the whole of the United Kingdom. We have now assembled a team of experts to research and investigate the best-known ghost stories. The village has changed very little in the last 200 years. It's like a time capsule, and the mysteries live long in its history.
The most haunted house in England, the Mount Everest of haunted houses.
A manor house, the locals don't want to talk about it. It's already somewhat isolated.
There's a tale of a nun that surrounds the rectory.
Did she come to a grisly end? What happened to her?
She was bricked up in a well.
It has sex, it has ghosts, it has all of the elements of a scandal.
It's about understanding why people did what they did.
Every story, whether it be a ghost story or a local story down the pub, has an element of embellishment. But with Borley,
Poltergeist activity, violent phenomena.
Words and sentences appeared on the walls of the house. Objects being thrown down the stairs.
Lights being seen, a horse-drawn carriage going past the window.
Out the corner of her eye, she saw a figure standing next to her, looked round and vanished.
Borley Rectory was built under the guidance of the Reverend Henry Bull in 1862. But a religious building has stood on the rectory site since the 14th century. The rectory was once a hive of paranormal activity. Now it is long gone, with only a small church and a scatter of buildings standing. From Harry Price and the mysterious nun at Borley Rectory, to the menacing monk and the Pinnock Bridge gypsy woman of Pluckley Village. Join us as we take you on a journey to find Britain's greatest ghost stories.
I'm Dan, and I'm a paranormal investigator. There's a tale of a nun that surrounds the rectory, and she seems to be the focus of the hauntings. It's believed that she and a monk had an affair, and within that affair, they were found out and she was bricked up in a well close to the grounds. There is many reports of lights being seen in the rectory. A horse-drawn carriage was seen going past the window. There was also reports of unexplained footsteps around the property, and servant bells would ring that had been disconnected for years.
My name is Rachel, and I am a private investigator. For me, it's about finding the facts within the myth. What actually happened, what's real and what isn't. The myth of Borley Rectory is something that appeals to everybody of every generation because it's got sex, ghosts, it has things that really draw people's interest in and make those headlines. At the end of the day, these stories are rooted around human interaction, which was popular back in the day just as it is now.
My name is Gavin. I'm a novelist. Borley Rectory is already ranked as one of the most haunted buildings in Britain, so immediately anyone in their right minds wants to write about it. It's already got a classic setup horror story. It's a manor house. The locals don't want to talk about it. They don't want anyone to go there. It has religious ties to it. There's the whole story with the nun.
I'm Serena. I'm a historian and an empath. What interests me is where these people came from, their interactions, their loves, their frustrations, the constrictions of the time. It's a privilege to understand who they were.
As a paranormal researcher, I'm really excited about investigating Borley. Just the energy and the feel around the area is amazing. As soon as you step onto the grounds, you can feel it straight away.
The lead investigator and most famous person to investigate the stories was Harry Price, an esteemed investigator in psychical research. He was one of the most famous names in ghost hunting. Price was different from other ghost hunters from his era and was ahead of his time in his methodical investigation techniques. At a secret location, our team will assemble. Their objective is to use modern-day techniques to examine the myths, history of the ghost stories recorded, their locations, and the people involved in them. They will seek the truth behind the headlines.
Well, Borley Rectory, the most haunted house in England, the Mount Everest of haunted houses. I think because it ticks all the right boxes. When you think of a haunted house, a gloomy Victorian mansion in a remote part of England, surrounded by gloomy evergreens and cedars, and you people that with eccentric characters and eccentric clergy. You throw into the mix some romantic ghost stories, a phantom nun, a phantom coach, into what you could say is the more modern poltergeist activity. It's investigated by the foremost ghost hunter of the day, Harry Price. You've got an adjacent church, which is also subject to paranormal phenomena. And another major factor of why we still love it is that it's no longer there.
The new house replaced the earlier rectory that had been destroyed by a fire. The rectory sadly was burnt beyond repair in 1939 and flattened in the 1950s.
I'm really excited because I've managed to find some newspaper articles online. It's a huge archive. There's many articles dating back from the 1930s, so I'm really looking forward to getting stuck in and seeing what's there.
I'm going to stay here. I've got so much research and things to go through. I'm going to cross-reference the photos, with the map of the house and everything. So that should keep me busy.
I'm going to check out the National Archives, I think, and look specifically at the ghost stories dated from the 1800s all the way up to now, just to see if there's been any changes or embellishments in the ghost stories.
Get some inspiration.
Exactly.
I'm going to be concentrating on the science and using modern-day methods that Harry Price wouldn't have been able to use back then, and really focus on the hotspots around the area.
Great. Perfect. Let's get started.
Okay.
Well, the nun comes out of the legend of Borley, where a Sister of Mercy is said to have fallen in love with a monk. Their liaison were discovered. They were punished by their superiors. The monk was hanged, and the nun mauled up alive. If you examine the locale, there was monastic buildings in Sudbury, which is only 2 miles from Borley. Also, you've got the Waldegrave family, who were lords of the manor of Borley for 300 years. Many Waldegrave women took holy orders and became nuns. One theory is that the nun is Arabella Waldegrave, and that's probably where we could have got the legend. But there's no firm evidence to back it up. But she is the major ghost which is seen at Borley.
Nuns live quite a mysterious lifestyle, and so therefore they can be the subjects of horror films and horror stories throughout the years. And so if there is actually a ghost at Borley, who is she and who is the real person behind this? Did she come to a grisly end? What happened to her? Where did she live? How did she come and go? These facts are often the things that get lost throughout the years, and it becomes more about the story of the nun rather than about the nun itself.
There's so much lost over time that something could start on one particular thought from a fact, and as it gets more told, it's the Chinese whispers effect, where more things get added to it and it becomes less believable as time goes on, and a bit more hysteria creeps in and people keep adding to it, diluting from what it originally was over time.
Harry Price was the foremost investigator of psychic phenomena in the interwar years, and it was a role that he more or less sort of created for himself. So Price went down to Borley in 1929 and met a reporter from the Daily Mirror down there, because they had been contacted by the Smiths, who were the incumbent at the time. The Smiths were experiencing alleged phenomena, apparitions and sounds and all kinds of things. Mabel Smith had a rather strange discovery one day. She opened one of the cupboards and there was actually a human skull. And the first time that Harry Price went to Borley, he experienced poltergeist-type phenomena, objects being thrown, things being broken. Smiths moved out of Borley in 1929 because they'd had enough of it. And 1930, the Foysters arrived. Lionel Foyster, Marianne Foyster, and their little adopted daughter, Adelaide. They claimed that they experienced all kinds of outlandish paranormal phenomena. Wall writing has become a very famous part of the Borley stories, when words and sentences allegedly appeared on the walls of the house, written supposedly by supernatural means. There were certain phrases, Marianne, the name of the rector's wife, help, mass, light, prayers, connecting them to the phantom nun that was said to haunt the house.
So there's a very strange story. The local rector was Lionel Foyster, and he married Marianne. He was a lot older than her. He baptizes her, marries her. She was the youngest of the family. And he was practically decrepit. I mean, she was in her 30s and he was in a wheelchair. She had to look after him. So how did she feel? You can imagine being stuck in isolation with an angry man, decrepit, and she needed some kind of attention. Everything changed when Harry Price turned up. He comes in like a whirlwind and blows everything apart that she's known. I mean, I'm sure with all the stories he created, the energy he brought, he made such an impact. And so I can imagine she took that and made her life more exciting and something to live for.
Price came down twice, and he felt that Marianne Foyster was causing a lot of the phenomena. He felt that she was faking things. And he left Borley under a bit of a cloud. The Foysters, they parted with bad company, because he sort of told Foyster to his face that he felt his wife was faking things.
One of the key things that often debunks the Borley story is the fact that Lionel, before he even married Marianne and moved it in, he actually lived in the rectory for 20 years beforehand, and he did not report one single ghostly going on or apparition for the entire time that he lived there.
Price was introduced to a gentleman called Whitehouse, and through his testimony, Whitehouse claimed that he'd experienced genuine phenomena at Borley in the 30s when the Foysters were there. And this sort of turned Price. Price felt that maybe some of the things that the Foysters described that he thought were fake were actually genuine. So that it kindled his interest in Borley again. So when the rectory became empty in 1935, he decided that he would carry out a project that he wanted to be doing for some time, which was to rent the building and carry out an on-site investigation, which was something quite novel at the time. He dreamt up this scheme of trying to install observers who would then stay for periods and report on any unusual happenings that took place. This is an original blue book of instructions. This is what this little book has become known as. This was a set of printed instructions which were prepared by Harry Price. It gives them an idea of the phenomena that they were supposed to have been allegedly reported at Borley over the years. Bell ringing, movement of objects, footsteps. And this gave them information on how to deal with the phenomena should they experience it, you know. The Blue Room was said to be one of the most haunted areas of Borley Rectory, and they were asked to spend 1 hour in the Blue Room in complete darkness and monitor what happened, you know. There was supposed to be a recording thermograph that would measure rises and falls in temperature, because there was an area on the landing outside the haunted Blue Room which became known as the cold spot, where people were overcome by this sensations of unease and coldness. Another area was the lawn, and there was a summer house that Price's observers had to visit regularly. They had to stay there for an hour at dusk and watch to see if the nun appeared.
The paranormal equipment that I use today is massively forward compared to what Harry Price would have been using. He used a lot of old school techniques where he would put flour on the ground and look for footprints amongst the flour. He would have tripwires over thresholds with bells on that would be triggered if someone walked through them. In this day and age, we've got recording devices, we've got cameras, we've got our phones. Everything can be documented these days, but Harry Price would have struggled massively.
There were a lot of planchette seances which were carried out using rolls of wallpaper to keep this continuous script going. And a lot of the mythology and the legends that surround Borley come from those planchette seances, the prophecy about the house burning down, the identity of the ghostly nun that's said to haunt the grounds, alleged murders that were supposed to have taken place in the rectory over the years, where remains would be found.
Harry Price ended up changing his own story, being the great showman that he was, because he was sent there by the Mirror to debunk some of the stories that had been sent to them, and he ended up presenting even more outlandish tales of things that he had recorded and personally seen.
He loved the showmanship of being in the newspapers and having this really exciting, investigative life. But then looking at his private life, the reality was he was actually a borderline alcoholic who was having problems with his wife, known to be a bit of a gambler, and perhaps used this ghost investigation as some kind of escapism. And so it has been said that perhaps Harry may have exaggerated or even to some extent made up some of these stories just to gain the attention that he craved.
And he was actually seen one night throwing pebbles at the window, to which he referenced that as an actual paranormal activity on his recordings.
Many of the stories set here revolved around Harry Price and his investigations. His work helped shape a great deal of understanding of the world of the supernatural. A lot of the work he did in the 1920s, 30s, and 1940s still influences a great many investigators today. Often they will use the very same techniques he used then. Harry Price didn't find any evidence, but was drawn to the rectory and wanted to continue his investigations. But what was the real cause of this increase in interest? This team will discover the truth, and for the very first time, reveal their findings to us, whilst breaking world records in doing so. Are the stories that have been reproduced over the years true, or just pure fiction? Too many coincidences for it to be just a story. There is no doubt that whatever the case, Borley Rectory and its terrifying history fully deserves its place as one of Britain's greatest ghost stories.
From looking at the old newspaper archives, I found a couple of facts which really set my mind into a decision about the Borley mysteries. First of all, I discovered that Marianne Foyster had been the one to ring the Daily Mirror to bring them in for the story in the first place. It wasn't a case of, you know, a juicy ghost story getting out and then wanted to investigate. She actually rung them up to get them in to take a look. And secondly, I discovered that Harry Price, after a period of time, ended up being paid a salary by the newspaper for stories.
Because this is the thing that I found out. I mean, there has to be a reason for her to call, right? So literally, from what I've read, I mean, she was sexually repressed, stuck with a guy that was a lot older than her, riddled with arthritis. Then, you know, she could have made stuff up. Then Harry Price comes along, strokes her ego, and something went on there. So...
Reading up on all the different accounts of the ghost stories, I can say, all the way back from the 1800s, it's consistent. All the signs are the same. The nun walking about the house, the bells ringing, all signs of haunting are completely consistent, which just makes me think that something obviously happened there.
I had a really good time. I was doing an investigation around the grounds, and there's a place called the Nun's Walk, and that was really active. You could hear footsteps, and you could sort of get the energy and the feel around that area. But in regards to getting anywhere near it, it was an absolute nightmare. No one wants you there.
The site was cleared after the rectory was demolished in 1944, and it was sold off for plots. 5 bungalows stand on the garden. Nothing stands on the site of the rectory. It's just grass. You can actually go and walk on the site where the rectory stood. One of the bungalows stands 50 foot from where the rectory was, and they've reported footsteps in their garden. The lady of the house would sit in the garden on a summer's evening, and she would look around and she would hear footsteps coming behind her. Look around, there's nobody there. But they also saw apparitions in their house. One night she was waiting for her husband to come home. She was lying on the settee, and out the corner of her eye, she saw a figure standing next to her. And she thought it was her husband, turned to say, "Where have you been?" Looked around and vanished, you know. After the rectory had burnt down, phenomena was supposedly reported from the church, and everybody thought that the haunting had moved across the road. Coffins being moved in the crypt. When I was 16 years of age, I went to Borley, photographed the church, and I photographed this anomaly in the churchyard. I didn't see anything on the camera lens when I did so. The rest of the clip of the photographs were completely clear, except for that one.
So from looking at the research and evidence, I've come to the conclusion that the mysteries surrounding Borley Rectory have been sensationalised and grossly exaggerated. I say this because Lionel Foyster did live in Borley Rectory for 20 years beforehand and actually reported nothing happening.
Yeah. I mean, also something else I found out. So the tenant afterwards was a guy called Captain Gregson, and he took out an insurance policy. And then soon after, there was a fire. Do you know what I mean?
Suspicious.
Is it slightly?
I think from the stories of the nun going back all the way to the 1400s, and then ghost stories sort of plaguing Borley Rectory from 1800s onwards, that something, with all the consistencies of the story, something happened there. So, and it has such a dark past that...
Yeah, for me, I definitely think there's paranormal activity surrounding Borley, absolutely. And in all fairness to Harry Price, he documented every single piece of evidence that happened inside the rectory. Marks on walls, footsteps, bells ringing, everything was documented. And that's a lot of commitment for a paranormal researcher.
But he was being paid by the Daily Mirror.
Yeah.
I do believe that there is ghosts that surround Borley, absolutely.
I'm not convinced. It's that whole conversation that, you know, sort of with Marianne calling the paper.
I think maybe with more time And maybe as technology gets better, then might be able to find something out in the future. I think there's something there, we just haven't unearthed it yet.
I think if I had a bit more time there, I could definitely get some evidence.
It's probably the only haunted house story in the world, I would say, which has had this attention. So many books, so many films, and I think that is the lasting legacy of Borley Rectory. Also, if Borley Rectory has still been standing, could have been turned into, I don't know, timeshare flats, offices, and we would go past it and say, oh, that's the old haunted house. But because it burnt down in such a dramatic way, you end up with the ghost of Borley Rectory itself.
This idyllic, beautiful English village, almost picture postcard in how it looks, has an altogether more grisly reputation. It has a large population of ghosts. Pluckley Village is the most haunted village in Britain.
Supposedly the most haunted village in England.
Pluckley said to have more ghosts than any other village put together.
It was actually featured in the Guinness World Records. I think they're up to 36 ghosts now.
One of them was the White Lady, who was buried in 7 different coffins. People seem to be drawn to Pluckley.
You get a feeling straight away, it's an energy of all those things that have happened to those people. It's like it's jinxed, and it's just so sad. And I've never known anywhere like it.
Pluckley is forever linked with tales of the supernatural. But why Pluckley? What exists in Pluckley's history that has made this seemingly one of the major epicenters of supernatural activity? Is there some kind of tragedy that exists in this village? Some kind of dark secret that haunts the streets? Ghost stories have long been passed down from generation to generation. This would be the case with Pluckley, almost as old as the time of William the Conqueror.
People seem to be drawn to Pluckley for ghost tours, and it's been exposed to the media numerous times, so probably a lot more people already know about it, and it's so accessible that you can just go there by train because it's a village all in itself.
Pluckley Village, supposedly the most haunted village in England, has had news stories coming right up to present day. However, because there are so many stories, it is very hard to believe that every single one of them are real. To get into the Guinness World Records, obviously you need to have a certain amount of ghosts, and it's sort of the general consensus that perhaps some of these have been embellished and one story has turned into a few stories just to kind of, you know, meet that criteria to get in.
Pluckley has recorded up to 36 ghosts in all one village, and one of them was the White Lady, who was buried in 7 different coffins, which already sparks immediate interest. Actually, there are so many ghost stories. I've got to see if I can actually remember all of them. There was the man who drowned at the waterworks in a wall of clay. There was a priest who died at prayer. The Lady of Rose Court, who had a love triangle in the Tudor times. A colonel who was hung in the woods. There was the highwayman, the gypsy woman on the bridge. There was the miller at the mill. There was the red lady who haunts the churchyard. And a small white dog was also reported.
It's quite an unusual story in a sense, because when you actually look at the facts, you need to determine, which of these are actually real and which of these are just hanging off another story. Because at the end of the day, people are attracted to popular stories. And once something becomes sensationalized in the newspaper, online, in modern day, it could go viral. People have these experiences, and it's always a hot topic of conversation because everybody can get involved.
So I've been investigating the paranormal for 5 years now. Pluckley has so many ghost stories, and in 1989 it was actually featured in the Guinness World Records, so that makes me excited. To be featured in a Guinness World Record is amazing. Pluckley village itself welcomes investigators, paranormal research teams to, I guess, enhance the ghosts that surround the village. There's many stories. I think they're up to 36 ghosts now around the village, but I think a lot of them have been 2 or 3 of the same ghosts, just with a little bit of a different twist. So I'm gonna focus on the gypsy at the Pinnock Bridge. She's said to have drowned in the stream close by. I'd like to investigate the Lady of the Red Court, who was in a love triangle and actually killed herself. And I'm also gonna focus on the White Lady who lives in St. Nicholas Church. She was buried within 7 coffins. And I wanna elaborate a bit more on that and find out as to why that is, and a bit of a background behind her.
To go to Pluckley, it's an honor to me. You get a feeling straight away, it's an energy of all those things that have happened to those people, which is fascinating. And just to delve in, because the people of Pluckley don't necessarily want to give you the information, but it's getting that trust from them so that you can find out who these people were and why they did what they did and what happened to them.
Pluckley has been recorded as one of the most haunted villages in the United Kingdom, and events that have confused and astounded investigators for years.
There was a lady who used to sell watercress, and it was her only income. So what she used to do is sell it on the bridge, and something very bad happened to her. When you go over the bridge, you can smell, she used to smoke a pipe, and you can smell the smoke. And imagine if you have the nerve to sit on the bridge and look to your right, she could be there just waiting. There's the Lady of Rose Court. Now, this was back in Tudor times. What happened was it was a love triangle. She was madly in love with this man. She thought that he had gone off. She poisoned herself. And then the worst possible thing. He came back for her, and she committed suicide. Again, another tragedy, and it's just so sad.
Those that live in the village seemingly share this land with apparitions that may well prove that there is life after death. For years, Pluckley has drawn different experts in their field, driven to solving the mysteries of Pluckley Village. It is here our team will investigate. The team have assembled at base. They will seek the truth behind the headlines. Led by Dan Jones, this team have been working in Great Britain, investigating the most famous cases of supernatural phenomena in the United Kingdom. Pooling together their resources, knowledge, and the very latest in technology for ghost hunting. As the team move to start the investigation, what will they discover?
Even today, there are headlines in national newspapers about Pluckley Village. So what I'm going to do is take a look at them, look back through the archives at all the other mentions, and just see if anything has developed over time and what else shows up.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm going to look at the documentation I've got, for the lady that saw the watercress and bushy bush, with the murder. Or it could just been a tragic accident, I want to find out what really happened.
I'm going to go back through the stories of the 36 ghosts and maybe see if more have cropped up over time. We're going to break the world record.
Yes.
I'm going to be focusing on the hotspots and hopefully, if I take my equipment, capture a voice phenomena, but I'm going to mainly focus on the areas that you guys are researching and really hit them hard.
Excellent.
Perfect.
Let's get started.
Britain has always been a place of mysteries, from the creation of Stonehenge to the fabled beast of Bodmin Moor. One thing is for sure, Britain has more ghost stories than any other country. Pluckley's reputation precedes it. It is well known in the circles of psychical research. These researchers have gone over almost every inch of the village, trying to ascertain what took place and the stories behind these hauntings. Various accounts of unusual phenomena have been recorded or witnessed. The team will begin their work and hopefully discover the real truth behind Pluckley Village. Pluckley is in the Guinness Book of Records, as it is reputed to be the most haunted village in Britain. It is reputed to officially have 15, possibly even as many as 27 ghosts, if some of the local stories are true.
Pluckley Village has had the reputation of being the most haunted village in England since at least the mid-1950s. Pluckley said to have more ghosts than any other village put together. There's a huge roster of phantoms at Pluckley. You have the haunted churchyard with the phantom dog, the lady with the red rose. There's the Black Horse pub, which has ghosts in there. There's the Coach and Horses, which clatters through the streets. The Hanging Man of Dicky Buss's Lane, the Phantom Miller, the Phantom Watercress Woman of Pinnock Bridge. There's the Phantom Highwayman at Fright Corner, the ghostly Tudor lady at Rose Court, and the Phantom Monk at Greystones. There's also the Screaming Woods as well. Pinnock Bridge is a location on the outskirts of Pluckley, and it's probably got the village's most famous ghost, which is the apparition of a gypsy watercress seller who is said to appear on the bridge, either as a sort of a huddled figure sitting by the roadside or as a sort of a strange glow at dusk. And she is said to have accidentally set herself on fire by smoking a clay pipe and died and burnt to death. And so she appears occasionally sitting beside this bridge. Rose Court is a house on the outskirts of Pluckley, which is associated with another building close by, Greystones. And there's said to be a ghost of a Tudor lady who haunts Rose Court, and she was romantically involved with a monk who lived at Greystones. And the result of this affair was that she committed suicide by drinking a draught of poisoned berries and died, looking out through the window towards Greystones in the distance. And her ghost is reported to be seen returning to Rose Court from time to time, where an apparition of a woman has been seen looking out of the window. Now, this seems to be a romanticised version of an actual event which took place in 1862 in the house, because Rose Court is not old enough to be a Tudor building. It's a later building. But there was a Victorian lady there who did actually commit suicide by taking an overdose of opium. So it could well be that the story of her suicide has had romantic elements grafted onto it, and so that this real incident has become the basis of one of Pluckley's ghost stories. The St Nicholas's Church at Pluckley is one of the most haunted buildings in the village. There's phenomena associated with the churchyard and the During Chapel, which is a prominent feature, which contains the tombs of the lords of the manor, the Durings and their wives. And that was investigated by a researcher called Frederick Sanders, who used to live in Pluckley. He wrote a book called Pluckley Was My Playground, which was published, I think, in the 1950s. And he investigated the During Chapel several times and claimed to have heard noises and seen strange lights inside there, knocking noises and things like that. In the churchyard, there's a phantom dog, an apparition of a woman in modern clothing, which I think 1970s modern would be the right period, because that's when the reports came from. But there's a famous ghost there of a lady in a red dress, who one of the Durings, who's buried in the chapel, with a red rose pinned to her dress, and she is said to be seen drifting through the churchyard, holding the rose in her hands from time to time.
From my research, what I discovered when looking at these different ghosts is that there's really not a lot of evidence at all, and some of the stories are in fact just a sentence. There's no details, there's no eyewitnesses, and to the best of my knowledge, it's very, very hard to prove that any of these, or many of them, are actually real at all.
Well, I found it's a very, very strong energy, and it's just so sad, and it's just so tragic. All those things have happened to those people. So there's been huge tragic accidents, drownings, people buried in clay, like a love triangle, and she kills herself, and it's just so sad. And I just feel it's like it's jinxed. There's this huge amount of sadness that you feel as soon as you enter, and I've never known anywhere like it.
I was taking a look through the newspaper archive, dating all the way back in time till the present day, because there are trending stories. And what I discovered really is that there are a lot of inconsistencies and not a lot of facts. For example, it may have a brief description of a ghost, but it doesn't say who saw it, when, where, or what time. And so I just came to the conclusion that a lot of it could have been fabricated.
Well, no, I don't get that, because the thing is, I've been going through all this research, and you're forgetting these are real people. It's just this huge amount of sadness. And the energy was not, it wasn't, it was really sad. And all these tragedies that have happened, it's not a sideshow, it's just that the ley lines that go around, the amount of energy that was here, and it was just a cry for help.
While I agree with what you said about the inconsistencies in the stories, some of them overlap with each other, there are still so many stories there that there could potentially be something there at the heart of it that might even be going up to 50 to break the world record.
Wow.
You're obsessed.
That obsessed.
Yeah, so I tried to concentrate my paranormal investigation around the hotspots of the village. There was evidence there. I've got evidence documented, but it's a very close-knit community, and it's the same again. I was getting more doors shut in my face than open. But yeah, I definitely agree that some of the stories are true. I felt that, the energy there. It was, yeah, really good.
Pluckley is a very old village in Great Britain. So old, in fact, that its earliest mention is in the Doomsday Book of 1086. Our intrepid team of investigators will work to hopefully uncover the truth. Dan and his team are completing their investigation of the site.
After assessing all of the evidence and going through the newspaper articles, I've come to the conclusion that most, if not all, of the stories are indeed fabricated, just for the lack of substance, and there's no evidence of who said what at what time, and I just feel like a lot of it's been confused.
No, I'm sorry, I don't agree. The fact is, the amount of energy that I've received, they're there. You can't just go by facts and stuff. You have to go by feelings. And you with your Guinness World of Records, they're trying to make up stuff, and you're factual and everything. It's just these tragedies happen to these people. So yes, I do believe in them.
Well, as much as I want it to go up to triple figures for the Guinness World Records, I have to agree with Rachel.
That's right.
There's just too many overlapping stories, and the locals don't even seem like they can tell it properly for it to be consistent.
I kind of agree with all of you. I get what each of you is saying. There is stories that I think have overlapped over time, and they kind of got lost along the way. But in regards to Pluckley being haunted, I definitely believe they've got a haunting going on there.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
There's something there.
Definitely, yeah.
Pluckley, this mysterious and unusual village, is home to some of the most terrifying stories of ghosts ever to be told in Britain. Dan Jones and his team have worked together to try to discover the truth behind the stories, to build on the work of many investigations of the past. Though they were unable to find a definitive answer to the mysteries of Pluckley, they certainly found information that further cemented the reputation of this village. There is no doubt that this typical English village, with an anything but typical history, greatly deserves its reputation as one of Great Britain's greatest ghost stories.